everybody loves horror. I mean, all television, movies, comics, it's all over the place. So I'm always looking to reach the broadest audience possible. You want to do something that is new and that is fresh and that has not been done before. That appeals, if you're doing queer comics, appeals to the queer community and addresses queer experience, but you also want to get the broadest audience possible.
I always say that, horror by definition is a genre of otherness and a genre of subversion. And queer people inherently understand what it is to be othered, and queer people understand what it is to be treated subversively by society. And so, one of the things that I am always quick to point out is that in so many ways, the term queer horror is almost a redundancy.
Hi, I'm Tara Madison Avery. I'm the publisher of Stack Deck Press, a cartoonist and editor. You can find me at stackdeckpress.com, all my publications anyway. You can also find me at Stack Deck Press on Instagram, at stackdeckpress.bsky.social at Blue Sky, and also just at the Stack Deck Press page on Facebook. Um, you're watching and listening to Two Geeks Talking.
Hi, I'm Michael Varrati. I am a filmmaker and one of the co-editors of Four Seasons of Fear, and you can find me at Michael Varrati on Instagram and Blue Sky, and you are watching and listening to Two Geeks Talking.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Two Geeks Talking is an entertainment industry interview show where we interview the creative people from the comic, film, TV, movie, and video game industries. And of course, I'm your host, Kurt Sasso. We're joined today by two very talented individuals. They are co-creating, editing, and a bunch of other things for an amazing anthology called Four Seasons of Fear. Tara was last on the show a couple of years ago, and Michael is his first time on the show here. We're joined by the ever-talented Tara Madison Avery, publisher of Stack Deck Press and director, screenwriter, and co-editor Michael Varrati for Four Seasons of Fear. How are you both doing today?
Doing great.
Holding it, kicking butt. Yeah.
That's good.
However you want to do it.
Yeah. Well, you gotta enjoy the creative process. Anthologies are rather interesting to work on. You're working with multiple people. You're working with multiple storylines, a bunch of themes, everything like that. For those that don't know anything about yourselves as creative people, tell us who you are and what you're bringing to Two Geeks Talking today.
Well, I'm a publisher of comics, published several award-winning anthologies. Four Seasons of Fear will hopefully be the next in a series. You might know me from We're Still Here, the world's first all-trans comics anthology. And I also published, though I did not have a lot of creative input, to We Belong, the all-black, all-queer sci-fi and fantasy comics anthology. The reason I didn't have much creative input is because you might have noticed I'm not black, and I wanted the editors to basically be in the driver's seat for that one. But I did over broad editor-in-chief oversight kind of stuff, which is mostly making sure the periods go in the right place and nothing is misspelled. Yeah, working on stories for other publications as well. Got a story for an upcoming bi visibility anthology. Just trying to get out there in the world and let people know we're still making queer-focused comics in a difficult time to be queer.
I am a screenwriter, filmmaker, producer. I work quite a bit in the world of horror and specifically queer horror. I have been involved in many, many productions, including many anthology films. A lot of people out there who may know my work have probably seen me on the Boulet Brothers' Dragula, where I was a writer and director, as well as a guest judge. I popped up a few times. I co-host a podcast called Midnight Mass with drag superstar Peaches Christ, where every week we talk about our favorite cult films. One of the big connectors of this is Tara and I met through Prism Comics and our time in the trenches of conventions. San Diego Comic-Con for I think close to 15 years now, I've hosted the queer horror panel, which has grown in size and attendance in the time that I have had the honor of doing so. At one particular San Diego Comic-Con, Tara and I were speaking about anthologies, decided that maybe we should do a queer horror book together, and this is the genesis of that.
I love that. I think that's amazing here. And that's actually dives into my first question. What is it about queer horror that you kept circling back to that you just couldn't let go of in the creation of this anthology?
Well, I think it's more of the macro connection to queer horror. I always say that, horror by definition is a genre of otherness and a genre of subversion. And queer people inherently understand what it is to be othered, and queer people understand what it is to be treated subversively by society. And so one of the things that I am always quick to point out is that in so many ways, the term queer horror is almost a redundancy because horror, by definition, is queer. It's a genre that I feel like a lot of queer folks gravitate to because we see ourselves in the themes, or we see an ability to find catharsis in the themes, because horror, through that dark lens of the fantastic, really allows creators and audience members alike to maybe tackle issues that the mainstream does not want to address head on, tie it up in a nice bow that we don't always get in life. Whether the nice bow ends, poorly or well, at least there's an ending, at least there's catharsis, and there's a sigh or a scream of relief at the end. So I think that there's just a bigger connection to horror for queer people, and I have seen that throughout my years of working and speaking on the subject. And so when it came to a book, I think that there was always an interest in getting those different voices. And that's one of the things that Tara and I spoke about immediately when plotting an anthology.
I think another thing about Four Seasons of Fear is there have been several queer horror comics anthologies. So we had to find a way to distinguish it. We had to find some sort of approach to it that would make it fresh. The idea came up in our conversations of basing it around sort of the calendar year. These stories are focused on holidays or seasonal activities. So we've got the big ones. We got your Christmas, we got your Halloween, we got your Easter, but we also have some things that are a little less well known. We've got Rosh Hashanah, we've got May Day, we've got Juneteenth, giving the creators the leeway to sort of dive into things that are very, very personal and very germane to their experience as perhaps Jewish folks or Black folks or labor organizers. This is what I think distinguishes the book that we're trying to make here from, say, other queer anthologies, fine anthologies. Like Theater of Terror, excellent book, but we're going for a different angle that would hopefully will find its place in the queer horror firmament.
The fact that you have 24 LGBTQ plus creators in the mix here, what can this book do that would just be almost impossible with a smaller, more tightly curated group?
It's like, I guess, the difference between a shotgun and a revolver. You have all of these different perspectives. You're basically covering a broad variety of experience and a broad variety of themes in one go. That is the value. I mean, we have trans creators, we have gay creators, we have bi creators, we have lesbian creators. We're going for every scary color of the rainbow here. And I do believe that the benefit of the anthology is it gives you sort of a snapshot of our community when we're doing a queer anthology, but also sort of a state of the queer art, a state of the LGBTQ take on horror.
Yeah, I think one of the great things that Tara has already highlighted is the fact that by doing a calendar year, we can touch upon the things that are obvious to us as someone looking at a calendar that you would maybe hit on when doing something connected to horror or holiday horror. But there are many things culturally that are maybe outside of a specific reader's or writer's purview that we are also looking to include. A gay male's perspective on Juneteenth, a gay Black male's perspective on Juneteenth is going to differ wildly from a trans person's experience with Rosh Hashanah. And those are two things that I, maybe writing about Valentine's Day, wouldn't want to touch on because that's not my experience or place to speak on. But within the confines of this book and this calendar, we can highlight all of those things and give the reader a really, really interesting year-long journey into not only different events and different moments, but different queer perspectives.
The fact that you have 24 creators, how were they chosen? What was the criteria? I know they're all extremely talented, or else they wouldn't be in this book here, but there must have been some on the edges of being included in the book that you're thinking maybe they could be included with a second issue. Like, how did that all come about?
We got a big hat and we wrote all these names on a slip of paper, and we just had some drinks, and we go to conventions. I work with Prism Comics, and Prism Comics is a nonprofit that supports LGBTQ, AIU, Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Rho comics creators and fandom from coast to coast here in the United States. And so in my travels, I've run into a lot of queer creators, and many of whom I've had the good privilege to publish before in other venues. And so there is the knowledge, there is this roster of people that I have access to, some of my usual suspects or unusual suspects, as the case may be. But we also sent some invites out to some people who we felt were very talented. So we were fortunate enough that some of these folks that I have not yet had the chance to work with were able to join us, like Jadzia Axelrod and Rye Hickman, both of people whose reputations precede them. We were fortunate enough to have them collaborate on a story for us. They're doing Rosh Hashanah. There's that. And Michael, of course, in his experience as a filmmaker, has a whole other set of people that were available for us.
Yeah, it was just really a matter of Tara and I sitting down and making a list of folks that we were interested in hearing stories from, who maybe would be interested in joining us on this endeavor. And then how it broke down is we sent invites out and we asked the creators, tell us what holiday or moment in the year you may be interested in, and give us a couple of them just in case. And one of the things that I thought was really illuminating is what I assumed would be the holidays or the moments of the calendar that I thought everybody would gravitate towards. Those weren't always the case. So we got some really, really interesting pitches from really great folks, and it was just really exciting. And I'm very glad that between us, we were able to send some invites out and get a lot of amazing creators in the process.
Is there, I'm not going to say favorites because that would be disingenuous to all the creators that are part of this actual book here, but are there like three that each of you like that you're like, this is how it sets the tone for this anthology?
I would say this, yeah, they're all my children, and I don't
Yes.
have favorites. But if you're looking for things that may be emblematic or particularly grabbing, I think that the three that I gravitate to, I think that David Boer's story about going back to school is an interesting take on things. And I really think it's kind of exciting. Juan Mance, one of my unusual suspects who tends to pop up in a lot of my publications, is doing something about voodoo, about Bear Insomnia and its association with events in the month of March. And if I were to go for a third, I think that Victor Kearney and his artist, I don't know how to pronounce the name. It's a Portuguese artist, but just beautiful stuff surrounding Christmas, a sort of a Christmas carol gone bad, if you will. That I think really those three kind of give us the broad range of the things that we're covering here.
Yeah, I, in my life as a filmmaker, have a very interesting split personality where I do a lot of horror films, but I also do a lot of holiday films. And I have a whole other career writing holiday rom-coms for television. It's not a secret. I talk about it at conventions all the time, but people are always amused by this. But because of that, I have a great affinity for stories set at Christmas. And I, of course, love holiday horror. One of the reasons this book even kind of came about conversationally is I'm obsessed with horror stories that fit a specific time of year, but I love Christmas horror, and the work that Victor and his artists are doing is just really, really got me excited. Much like Tara, I would have a hard time choosing three favorites because everybody brought their A game, and I'm not just saying that. I think there's really, really amazing stories and really unique stories that I get excited every time I go through the pages. I would like to highlight that Sonia Saturday's July 4th story is one that I was really excited about because July 4th was a holiday that when we started going out to artists, I did not think anybody would pick. And almost immediately, Sonia came back with an idea. And I think, sort of in this moment in time, politically and being queer in the world, a July 4th story actually made more sense than I think I thought I realized. So I was thrilled that she tackled it and she did it in her way, which I absolutely love. And I think, yeah, I don't know if I can single out any particular ones because I love everybody's work so much.
Because I'm also in the TV and film industry as well as a DIT there, and I love the fact that the horror genre was severely panned by professors at university and things like that. They thought it was a lowbrow type of a style of medium, which I completely disagree with. I think it has its place in cinema for sure, or else we wouldn't have amazing films like Dracula, among other things. But I digress. The fact that you've dissected horror for many years on screen and through your podcast and through what you're currently creating here, when did you start thinking in terms of panels and page turns and static images instead of just shot lists and edits?
That's a great question. I think that Ultimately, I just love the medium of storytelling. And I think that when given the opportunity to tell a story, I will take it no matter the form. But I have always been a fan of comics. I love comics. I think that there is a great grand history of horror comics. From EC to Marvel having Dracula to all sorts of different things that are happening today. David Dastmalchian, famous horror actor, is doing his own horror comic at Dark Horse. David Booher does horror comics. Casey Gilly does horror comics. My pal Adam Caesar, who wrote Clown in a Cornfield, did a Dark Horse series called Dead Mall that I'm currently adapting for screen right now. Horror is a great part and parcel genre for the comics medium. And as a horror fan who also grew up reading comic books, I'm actually surprised it took me so long to get there. So I think that it just was a inevitable conclusion. And what I think is exciting about it is there are things that you can do on a page that you just logistically can't do on a screen, which means you can expand a story in stranger ways, I guess I'll say.
So, Tara, with Stack Deck Press, you've been doing this for a number of years now. You've had a lot of strong anthologies and a lot of amazing single issues as well, too, throughout your many years here. What was one problem or gap that you wanted Four Seasons of Fear to solve that earlier queer-centered anthologies didn't fully address?
Well, I'm always looking to reach the broadest audience possible. Got to thread the needle. You want to do something that is new and that is fresh and that has not been done before, that appeals if you're doing queer comics, that appeals to the queer community and addresses queer experience, but you also want to get the broadest audience possible. So I do believe that horror was something I really had not tried as a genre. I don't have anything like Michael's experience with the genre. It is not something that I am a longtime devotee of. Michael mentioned EC comics. I've read my share of gory EC comics, and I do remember that few issues of Ghosts that my brother had, the DC's horror comic from the 70s, handed down to me when I was a kid, really sent chills up my spine. Maybe that even scared me so much that I didn't return to the genre right away. But yeah, I thought that you know, this would be a chance to hit a wider audience. I mean, last anthology would come out and play the Queer Sports Project. It's about sports comics, and it's gotten critical success. It's up for a Lambda Literary Award, all that. You might have noticed that they don't make a lot of sports comics in the United States anymore. That's a very thin slice of bread there. It's a very niche audience. Or horror is everybody loves horror. I mean, all television, movies, comics. It's all over the place. So I thought that this would be a great way to sort of cast a wider net, work a different part of my creative brain than I'm accustomed to doing, and yeah, I'm even contributing a story to this with a historical interest, shall we say, about the ancient Roman precursor to Valentine's Day, which is pretty much a horrific event in itself. So just trying new things and looking for new readers, but trying to stay true to the queer experience.
Okay, that's really good. What's the most misunderstood aspect about the horror genre that people who don't follow it misunderstand?
I think it's exactly what you said. It's often dismissed as lowbrow or populist and not often treated with the respect that maybe some other genres are. And that's, I think, because there have been these cultural moments where maybe specific kinds of horror or subgenres of horror became so popular that that fixed what the public thought horror as a whole was. A lot of folks will come to me and say, "Oh, I don't like horror movies and I'm not interested in horror movies." But then when you talk to them further and ask them to list their favorite films, they'll go through, and one of them is always something like, "Oh, The Silence of the Lambs. I love that movie." I'm like, "That's a horror movie." And people will want to argue with you about that, but Nancy Meyer has never made a movie where a cannibal eats somebody. I'm sorry. That's a horror film. It's really just about how the genre plays out. And there are so many different facets of genre that sometimes the base label that's applied to it allows people to kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater. But we know historically horror has always been here. It's always been a root interest of literary scholars. It has always been a mechanism for commentary, for satire, for lampooning what's going on at the time. It's a very, very powerful genre. It's also a genre that is financially very strong. There's not a studio in Hollywood, except for maybe Disney, that has not stayed open thanks to the success of a horror movie or franchise. So it's one of those things where I think when people poo-poo it, it's more of a doth you protest too much. We all love it a little bit, whether we admit it or not.
I think the editing side of things is also interesting because a good edit, whether it's in film or in comics, can make or break a story.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hardest part about whether you're too invested in the genre itself or if you're too close to the subject matter, then sometimes you may not have that objective lens that other people have, which I think is interesting because you're working with 24, at least 24 amazing stories here. How do you edit for emotional truth in a horror anthology without sending off weird edges that make the stories memorable?
I think that editing is kind of to me sort of like, you remember the Spencer Tracy quote of like, what's the secret to acting? Just know your lines and don't bump into the furniture. I think that editing is mostly, you read it, does it make sense? You know, if it's a horror story, does it have some thrills, some scare, you know, and perhaps even some gore? I don't think gore is essential to horror, but it's something that, you know, like the turn of the screw, no blood and turn of the screw, right? But it's a classic horror story to make sure that the story makes sense. And then there's also, you know, certain, you know, comic specific, like especially if you're dealing with, let's say you've got a writer and an artist as opposed to a cartoonist who does both, you know, do the images and the words line up? Is the layout that comes from the artist serving the story that the writer has conceived, you know? Also, the way a layout can be organized, it contributes to suspense. I mean, I think I shared with you a page from Rabbit Trial, one Jose Cardenas and this artist. This is the first time I've ever worked with this artist, so I don't remember her name, but just a simple thing where you like going down like, you know, four vertical panels and it's, you see the treetops and you go down through the forest. It gets darker and darker until you are at ground level where the young protagonist is in a very tense situation and you don't even need to see any monsters or gore or anything to know it because the mood has already been created.
Yeah, I think it also comes down to authenticity, which I think is maybe a strange thing to say about a genre with vampires, zombies, and space aliens, but it's really how you utilize those tropes, right? And it's how you utilize those mechanisms. What is the writer trying to say, and do they say it well? And I think that we all have seen stories that are just sort of presented for shock value, and those don't necessarily last, whereas movies and stories and comics that were made with some earnest thought behind it, that they find their audience. And I think that's really what we were looking for. We weren't trying to tell people how to tell their stories or how to, you know, craft their holidays or times of the year, but rather, you know, what you put on page, is it communicating something that will really attach to the reader and give them that sense that horror is intimate. So when you share something, you want to feel like you're part of it in that moment, whether that's terrifying or not.
These horror icons that we've known and loved for 100 years or so, whether it's Western or Eastern genres, whether it's the most known to the least known here, do you have any top 3 or 5 that you will always gravitate towards their medium, whether it's comics or film? And this is for both of you.
I would say I have a quick and immediate answer. I am a huge Dracula fan. I've always been a fan of Dracula. It is certainly one of my number one obsessions. In my home, there is a piece of Dracula art in every room, whether it's a Hammer poster or a painting or something. I love the original novel. I've read multiple translations of it from different countries. I think that the character continues to give, give, give. I think there's something just really, really great about the endurance of Dracula. Dracula is the most adapted horror character, I think fictional character, to screen, partially thanks to public domain. It means any yahoo can write a Dracula movie. I know because I've written 2. So I'm a big fan of Dracula. I love the gothic horror. So that would be an immediate answer. As for the other 2, I do love vampires. I think Carmilla's great. And you can't go wrong with Frankenstein.
My entry to the world of horror was Universal Monsters stuff, and like I was like in the 70s on Saturday afternoon there were horror movies, a lot of Universal Monsters stuff on channel 20 on the UHF channel. You know, a friend of mine and I would sit in front of the television and watch the old black and white universal monsters, and Frankenstein was always the one that spoke the most to me. The sort of the misunderstood, bruiser who doesn't realize how frightening, or and perhaps occasionally how what the consequences of his actions might be. Beyond that, I think that the movie that has scared me the most ever, probably also has certain overlap with science fiction, is that the 1978 version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I still have nightmares about that to this day because just the whole notion that you could be surrounded with people who look and behave just like normal people, but are very much not your friends, very much not who you believe them to be. In a time of paranoia and political crisis as we're going through right now, I think that the experience documented in something like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which has now been made the original one from the 50s, and like three more remakes, and they keep coming back to the same story. It was just the Donald Sutherland, that bit that really scared the pants off of me as a kid. It keeps coming back. It keeps every era, its relevance is reimagined for a new audience.
Do you find that these reimaginings, do they still hit like the original, or is it just someone's take on a medium that's already been done to the point of maybe homage is no longer possible?
I think it depends on the reimagining, honestly. I think it depends on the reimagining and the intent. It's interesting. There is in film circles, especially with genre movies, whether it's science fiction or horror, people tend to get big mad about remakes. But the reality is nobody ever talks about or takes huge umbrage with the fact that we keep staging Shakespeare plays or we keep staging Chekhov plays. Invariably, new eras and new generations, give us new audiences, and they want a version of a story for their generation. And the one thing that's different from stage as opposed to film is that film is, forever. So if someone is really, really interested, they can go back and watch Bela Lugosi's Dracula, or they can go see the 1958 Christopher Lee as Dracula. But, there's a whole generation of Dracula fans who first saw Dracula as Gary Oldman, thanks to Francis Ford Coppola. There is a generation of Dracula fans who are probably seeing Dracula as Luke Evans in Dracula Untold, or as Dominic Purcell in Blade Trinity. It's just an entry point. And I think if someone's really excited about it, they will go back and look. And I think that it just all really depends. There are certainly cash grabs. I think that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is certainly one of those movies that is undeniable. Been remade many, many times, but it's been hard to hit that original authenticity. But I would say that if someone saw any of the remakes or sequels and it made them go watch Tobe Hooper's original film, it scared the pants off of them, then all those movies did their jobs.
Yeah, remakes have to bring something new to the table. I mean, and I agree with Michael. There's no shame in a remake. And I do believe that sometimes fans like, oh, that's not the real Dracula. The real Dracula is Bela Lugosi, or that's not the real Frankenstein, or the real insert franchise character work here. It's like, well, if that's how you feel, you can watch that. It's still out there. That's how you feel, you can read that. You can reread that book. If this new thing isn't for you, then it's not for you. Let it speak to the people who it's supposed to speak to, and I think that that's not just something that's true of remakes, but it's also true of like queer cultures too, like queer comics and movies and other media, is that's like, well, I don't like it, so and so is not, this character is not supposed to be queer, this character is not supposed to. It's like, okay, fine, then go read the old stuff that keeps you in your safe space if that's how you feel about it. Earl Stanley Gardner said, like, he was famous mystery writer, had a lot of his books adapted for movies, and of course the necessity of putting a novel on screen is that you're going to have to make a lot of adjustments and fit for time, fit for medium, and all that stuff. And the Gardner superfans are like, gosh, Mr. Gardner, aren't you just shocked at what Hollywood's done to your books? And then he turns to the collected group of journalists and gestures toward his bookcases. I didn't do anything with my books. They're all right there. If an adaptation or injecting a sort of queer element in something makes you uncomfortable, well, then just go back to the one you like and leave everybody else alone.
I was going to say, in terms of from a Dracula standpoint, Renfield with Nicolas Cage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that was really well done in my personal opinion. I thought it was a great take on a character that never really got much of the spotlight.
Well, and it's funny because in the 2-year span that Renfield came out, we got Last Voyage of the Demeter, a Dracula movie. We got Luc Besson's Dracula. We got Nosferatu, which of course doesn't exist without Dracula. So it's this thing where If you build it, they will come. It just depends what you build and who's going to show up.
The Kickstarter is currently ongoing. Supporters are obviously a huge factor. Getting those notifications and before the pre-launch actually happens is always a huge factor. How are you engaging with not only yourselves and social media and everything along that line, but how are your 24 other creators also engaging in regards to the promotion of this amazing anthology?
We are aiming for a launch within the next few weeks. A lot of the pieces in place. We're just preparing some promotional materials, basically with sample art from creators. As more of that rolls in, it gives me the opportunity to sort of flog that. We're going to lean into it pretty hard. We would like to have that thing launched, say by, I think the latest launch date would be the 28th of April. We don't want to go too fast, but we have gotten some initial interest. We were getting some people who are signing up for notifications about the book already. That is always a big help. So because if we have enough people who are already signed up for updates, that means when you switch it on, you have a large amount of people who are ready to participate, ready to back it, ready to crow about it to the rafters. So we also have an advantage. Kickstarter crowdfunding with an anthology is a great thing. If you have a work that's just one creator or one creative team, you have that creator or creative team's fans, and that is your base. That is who you're reaching out to. When you have 24 people and you're doing a Kickstarter, you have all of the fans, all the followers of that group of people. It is the sort of a built-in advantage of doing an anthology that when you're crowdfunding, you're drawing from a whole lot of individual ponds of support. We want them to post, once or twice a week. You want them to let their fans know that Four Seasons of Fear is their current project and that it's something different, new in both horror and queer comics. The crowdfunding experience can be a grueling one. People get tired of seeing you on social media sometimes, but I guess an advertising never hurts to saturate the media environment with your product and your personal charm. So you're going to see a lot of us as this progresses on social media, telling people how awesome we are. We're gonna try to get all of our individual fans, followers, and journalistic cohorts involved in the process.
In terms of the Kickstarter itself here, what type of perks, what type of products are we looking forward to? Hardcover, softcover, like what's the overall layout of this amazing campaign?
We're starting with the soft cover. If response is strong enough, we might consider a hardcover. Soft cover is where we're starting from. That's what we got our printing bids for. Was for a soft cover. Round up the usual suspects. So we have stickers, we have pins, we got enamel pins, we have personalized sketches. I've done this several times before. You just grab the sketchbook and break out the pens and do a little personalized sketch for the backers. Probably will refrain from original art. Original art is going the way of the dodo because fewer and fewer people actually draw on paper. I might be one of the last ones. Everything's digital now, and the results they get are hard to argue with. I should have gone digital 20 years ago, but I thought, no, I got my own thing. But Michael has got access to some things as a member of the film industry that I do not.
Yes, one of the things that we're going to offer as a incentive, I recently in the last few years did a movie called There's a Zombie Outside, which is a queer horror film. It's a meta queer horror film to be exact. And I have a few Blu-ray copies of it that are completely signed by the cast and crew. And so one of the things that we're going to do is for folks who bid above a certain level, I'm going to put all those names in a hat. And so they have the opportunity to win one of two Blu-rays that are completely signed by the cast and crew. I also have Midnight Mass t-shirts if people are interested in those. We can pull from the world of wacky horror movies, and I'm happy to help people who want to help us.
Is there something about the film industry in terms of the films that you created or the films that you've been a part of from the horror genre that people should watch for the first time? Like not the classics that you've previously mentioned, but are there some like really niche horror films that would be interesting for those that love the genre?
Yeah, especially if you're interested in queer horror, we're having a great renaissance of queer horror artists. One of the people that I love to shout out whenever I get the opportunity is a Australian filmmaker named Alice Mayo McKay. She is a trans filmmaker who has been making movies since she was 14, I think, but continues to just do amazing work. I gave a blurb for one of her movies where I said, if this is the future of queer horror, sign me up. And I stand by that. She does these great punk rock, trans, queer stories that are sort of analogous of all of the things that we know as genre tropes, but through a queer lens that we haven't seen before or that mainstream studios maybe never permitted. She made a movie called T-Blockers, which is very much an Invasion of the Body Snatchers kind of movie. Her current movie is out right now. It's about a serpent person, which I cannot wait to see. She's bringing it here to LA. I really, really love her work. There are just some really, really great platforms out there that support emerging artists. Shudder has a lot of great original films. Screenbox has a lot of great original films. I just really recommend folks broadly search queer horror on the internet and see what current movies are offered to them, because there's a lot of really good ones.
Tara, any of your favorites in terms of the comic side of things?
This might be a little niche, but I do think of it as a horror story. It's going back a few decades, but Jaime Hernandez's Flies on the Ceiling, which is a short story about the character Isabel Rubens as, the tortured writer in Jaime's sort of locus también milieu, and she is racked by guilt over a failed marriage, over an abortion, over many, many things. And she is sort of pursued by like a chicken-footed demon throughout the entire thing and takes different forms every time she sees it. She goes back to Mexico to sort of face her fears and, and come to peace with herself and her origins, etc. The demon shows up once again as this sort of elegant bride at a wedding dancing. Instead of leaving proper human footprints, leaving sort of definitely bird footprints, she says to Isabel, it's not your sins, but your guilt that allow me to come to you. And I just think that, the sort of the personal aspect, the way horror has the capacity to not just frighten us with flashiness, but also can speak to personal things, that's the sort of horror that really catches my interest.
Everyone has one person that inspired them on their path to where they are today. Who was that for you?
That's a great question. I think that I am most inspired by people who don't ask permission. I'm not thinking of an immediate name, which maybe is indicative of the fact that I like too many poorly behaved folks. But I do think of someone like John Waters. I don't make movies like John Waters, nor would I, deign to try. But one of the things that I've always admired about him as a filmmaker and artist is that he firmly decided what he was going to do, and he did it. The system be damned, the studios be damned, and he made it work. I often speak to filmmakers who are trying to find their footing, and there is this fear that I encounter a lot, that what if they make something that people don't like, or what if they make something that doesn't catch? Well, the truth is, if the worst thing that happens to you is you made a bad movie, so what? Because at least you made a movie, and it's been my experience that all art eventually finds its people. And if your work affects even one person, then your job as artist is done. Of course, it's nice if that one person is 10 and those 10 people are 100 and those 100 people are 1,000. But once you create something and give it to the world, if it touches one life, you've done a great job. And I think that one of the really wonderful things about spending time in the world of cult cinema and having these conversations that Peaches and I have every week, that I talk about on panels, that I tour and speak at theaters about, is that art ultimately is personal. You cannot worry about making art for the masses, because if you make something for everybody, then you've made something for nobody. Make it for yourself first. Make it for that person who needs it, and it will find its place. And so people like John Waters, who just decided to do the damn thing and got a group of friends together who were like-minded to do it, I have to admire that.
From a professional standpoint, you've been in the film industry for a number of years. You've been in the comic industry as well. You've basically worked in almost all forms of entertainment. I'm expecting you to get a musical created at some point in time, maybe. Is that possible? Yeah, you're thinking about it. That's good enough for me. So from,
Sure.
from a professional standpoint, you are successful. Do you consider yourself personally successful?
No, but I don't know any artist that does. I think that I have had successes. I certainly have had those moments where I feel like I've had a win. But I think the truth is, when you are a working creator, there are so very few of us who crack that like 1% where you just feel like I made the thing and now I can stop. And I think if someone feels like if they made the thing that now they can stop, then that's a mindset I don't understand. I think people who are driven to tell stories, to create, we can't help ourselves. We can't rest. We have to keep doing it. And so I feel satisfied and happy with stories that I've made. I feel like some of them have been successful. But when I wake up in the morning, I feel like there's more to do. I feel like there's more to achieve. I feel like there is always another hill to climb. And so I think that I've had successes, but I don't know that I'll ever be satisfied enough to say that I'm successful.
The reverse of success is failure. How do you deal with your failures?
Yeah, well, you deal with them. I think that failure is as important to an artist's trajectory as success, maybe more so, because I think that you learn what works, you learn what doesn't. And sometimes the beautiful disasters are terrible in the moment, but lead to the more interesting inspirations and stories later, because I think that sometimes we allow ourselves to become so consumed by the idea of something not working or something failing. And it is so crushing and crucial and huge in your brain, but at the end of the day, we get to tell stories. We get to play pretend. This is, a career path we've chosen where make believe is a big part of it. And when you are away from the thing that upset you so, you can learn from it. Maybe you can laugh at it, and maybe you can apply it to the next thing while realizing that it's both completely serious to you and not so serious in the grand scheme. And maybe those are the things that help mend your broken heart. I don't know.
The younger generation is looking at your work and they're becoming inspired to be creative in their own way, whether it's as a director, an editor, a comic writer, or a writer in general. Maybe you're inspiring them down the path with your own works, even with your own conversations with them as well too. How can they inspire the generation that follows them?
Honestly, the best thing you can do is make the damn thing. That's what I always tell people. I think sometimes about a college talk that I did up in Sacramento a number of years ago, and a student asked me, "What if I can't make my movie for less than $5 million?" And I remember telling him, "Well, just make it anyway." The reality is that no one's just going to hand you everything you need for the art that you want to create, especially first time out. Maybe you think you can't make your movie for 5 million, but the truth is most people never get that amount of money. Some people make their movie for 5,000, some people make their movie for 500, but if you don't make something, no one's ever going to know what you're capable of. Even if the thing you make is flawed, at least you have something to show. At least you have something to be proud of. At least you've created. I think that it ultimately is an issue with so many folks who are waiting to start, is they're waiting for the right moment, but there's never a right moment. And I think it was Lemony Snicket who said, "If you are waiting for the perfect time, you'll be waiting for the rest of your life." So my feeling on it is, don't wait, make something. And even if it's not the thing you wanted to make, you will learn something from the process of doing and the process of creating that you can then apply to the next thing. It's to make art, to be a creator is to be constantly a student, to be constantly learning, even from yourself. So if the younger generation wants any bit of advice, just go do it.
If your life was a comic book or a film, what would its title be? And what would its soundtrack be?
The soundtrack would probably be lots of burping and snoring. I guess would have to be I guess we call it late nights and heavy mornings would probably be the name of the autobio comic I will never write. No, that's not true. I do plenty of autobio comics, usually short form. But yeah, I would suppose that would be.
Well, my last name is Varrati, so I've always joked that my biography, in whatever form it takes, should be called Varrotica. As far as music, a soundtrack, I don't know. I definitely was that kid and teenager and still like would probably do this if my back didn't hurt so much all the time. That would go to punk shows in basements and garages and like in the weirdest far-flung spaces. So I'd probably want some weird punk band or a really queer punk band. Verotica as soundtracked by Pansy Division. That would be make me very happy. So
Nice. Awesome. Oh, well, I hate to say this, Tara and Michael, but that ends this particular episode of Two Geeks Talking. I want to thank you both so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you
for having us.
Before I let you both go, where can we find you? How can we support you? Of course, where is this amazing Kickstarter campaign and anything else you both would like to promote?
You can find Four Seasons of Fear on Kickstarter. We can provide a link to you so that you can share that with your viewers and listeners. You can find all of my publications at stackeddeckpress.com. I'm often found wherever you will find the organization Prism Comics at conventions across the country. You can find me on social media on Instagram at StackDeckPress, on Blue Sky at stackdeckpress.bsky.social, and on Facebook, Stack Deck Press page. Just search for it, and that's how you'll find me.
Yes, to reiterate what Tara said, please check out the Kickstarter. Please consider donating. Thank you for supporting us. And that would be the place I would urge you to look first, especially if you're excited about this project. You can follow me at Instagram and Blue Sky at Michael Varrati. As for other things, you can look on IMDb. All of those movies are out there somewhere. And every other Wednesday at midnight Mass, me and Peaches Christ, talking about your favorite movie to talk through at the theater.
Well, like I said, that ends this particular episode of Two Geeks Talking. You can, of course, find this interview and over 1,200 plus others, because I've lost count, since 2008 on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TGT Media. The podcast you can search by searching Two Geeks Talking. That's TWO Geeks Talking, wherever you get your podcasts. And as I say every week, everyone has a story to tell. It's up to me to help bring that out. Thanks for listening and watching on Two Geeks Talking.